Mathoura. Have you ever heard of it? I hadn't, neither had my parents. But that is where we were headed in August 1984, after Dad had received a promotion to branch manager of Westpac. We had been in Orange in the central west New South Wales for the past 5 years. But now we were headed south, way down south, Riverina country. Mathoura, 620 people, give or take a few. 20 minutes south of Deniliquin, also known as Denny, as the locals would call it, and 39 kilometres north of Echuca, Victoria. It was situated right on the majestic Murray River, and at the town's back door was the largest red gum forest in the southern hemisphere. We didn't know what to expect in Mathoura or how long we'd be there, but looking back at those years, August 1984 to January 1988, were the best of my childhood. Mathoura Public School, about 90 kids, kinder to year 6, and I thought the best teachers in the world. My teacher the entire time I was there was Mr. Dankert, and little did I know the lasting impact he'd have on me, even from such a young age. I was 6 when we arrived in Mathoura in August 1984. Cross-country running. As a Year 1 student, I'd never heard of it. But once introduced to it, I fell in love with it. This is when I first discovered I was born to run. I believe it was 1985 when I first ran my first cross-country event at Mathoura Public School. 2 kilometres was probably the distance, which would have probably equated to probably 6 times around the school's small sporting oval, an AFL one at that, or VFL as it was known at the time. I remember running it easily, so easily in fact that when I finished over a lap in front of everyone else, they all complained to the teacher that I was a lap short. With little complaining, I set off running again, completing a bonus lap. In my eyes, just for the sake of it. My time qualified me for the next level of cross-country, but the school would not allow me to go because of my age and that I was only in Year 2. I can recall Mr. Dankert saying that I had a bright future in cross-country, and he started calling me Little Deeks, after the Australian marathon runner Robert De Castella, who at the time was in his prime of running and was the current Commonwealth Games marathon gold medal champion. It's funny looking back, but from that moment till present, I always took notice whenever Robert De Castella's name popped up in news bulletins, newspapers and magazines. When I wrote this in 2009, 25 years ago, I didn't really know who he was or much about him, but I was proud as punch to share his nickname. 12 months later, I ran the school cross-country again, this time in an eligible age group. This time I was able to progress to the next level. My cross-country running took me to districts, to the town of Moama, 25 kilometres south of Mathoura. The town was right on the banks of the mighty Murray River, only a bridge away from the town of Echuca and Victoria. I don't remember much about the race except some bush tracks running next to the river, the Murray River. I don't remember what I came, but I did miss out on progressing to the regionals in Baruga. I do remember being disappointed. Another year down the track, and once again I found myself representing Mathoura at Moama. This time I placed second and qualified for the next level to be held at Baruga. I don't remember much about Baruga. I do recall walking through the bush on the warm-up walk when you get to familiarise yourself with the track. I also recall having to run through a small creek, and I think it was raining. There's a distant memory of being wet. In terms of placings, I can't remember what I finished, but it wasn't high enough to qualify for state cross country. I remember thinking how good it would be to finish in the top 8 and get to travel to Sydney to represent Riverina at state cross country. Baruga was the last time I got to represent Mathoura in cross country. At the end of the school year, 1987, Dad was transferred to branch manager of Westpac at Dunedoo. We were heading back up north to the central west. Looking back at Mathoura, the first things I think of are the great outdoors. With the school and as a family, we spent so much time in the red gum forest, the Gulper forest, from school camps to family barbecues to floating down the Murray on tyre tubes or in canoes. So much of our time there seemed outdoors. It was in the same forest that Mr. Dankert would take a group of us after school in his small brown car, a Datsun I think, to practice our cross-country running. There were some great sandhills in that forest, and I remember running them in training. I also recall seeing black wild pigs running through the forest, but luckily that was from the safety of the car. One fond memory is one training afternoon, Mr. Dankert getting his car bogged on return to the school. we cross-country kids couldn't run across the schoolyard quick enough to the principal's residence to tell him of what had happened. It was a very close-knit school and community, and I have very fond memories. It was sad to leave, but the town and the time there will always be a part of me. 25 years on, this is written in 2009, I look back and remember running around the school oval on the forest trails at Moama and Baruga. I know for certain that this is where my running took off, and I discovered a desire to one day represent at state cross-country. After all, I was the little Robert de Castella. Everyone, welcome to the Running with Heart podcast. I am Andrew Neville, and I'm on mission 231, supporting the Heart Foundation as I train and prepare both physically and mentally to run the Sonda Monster, which is 231 kilometres of the Lara Pinta Trail in the Northern Territory, Australia, in May 2022. So that opening chapter that I've read from today or this week is obviously from my time in Mathoura and when I first, learnt about running or got introduced to running, especially trail running. And reading that again, it brings back memories and, reawakens memories I forgot of when I wrote that. I wrote that back in 2009 when I was recalling some of my early running days. But the adventures in Mathoura, especially in that Red Gum Forest, as a kid, between the ages of 6 and 9, were just incredible. So many fond memories, and I spoke about recently with the guys on the Pick 199 podcast, recalling the Mathoura days, and Mr. Dankert, who I credit my love of running to, would take us out when you made it to the next level in cross country, take us out into that Gulper forest and literally drop us out of the car into the forest and say, I'll meet you back at school. At the time, it felt like it was 10 Ks, but it was probably about 2 Ks, and you'd run back in, dodging the trees, up and down the sandhills, on the dirt roads, back across the bridge, which crossed the Gulper Creek, and then I think it was about 3 blocks to the school and onto the school oval where he'd be waiting. I also remember in Moama, just reading that then, one of those times I went to Moama to the next level. Me and my mate Mark Pell, we were out in front in the race, and the Moama school had provided the students who were the marshals on the course, and these 2 kids had actually turned the arrows pointing down the wrong track. And so me and my mate came leading the race to this fork, and we went left where the arrow was pointing, and then realised down the track that we'd been sent in the wrong direction. Had to turn around and try and catch up the race, and we didn't win the race, but we caught up. But yeah, that's another memory I had. But it was such a, reading that, floating down the tubes in the Murray River and that, just good times, great adventures, and really where the love of my outdoors and fitness and just being active came from in those 3 years in Mathoura. And as I said, it always be close to my heart, my time there, and the people met, especially Mr. Dankert. So in this episode of the Running with Heart podcast, last week we looked at my first marathon on the Gold Coast and the lessons I've learned since then, and how far I've progressed, or how much I've progressed as a runner since then, on this journey that has led me to this journey, which has me training and preparing for the Lara Pinta Trail. And so I thought it was fitting, after doing the first marathon, we're working our way back here just to get, a better understanding of who I am as a person and where the love for running came. And I was going to look at the first City to Surf race, because that's a big part of where my running really took off. But to understand that race, you really got to get to know me before then. And I thought, well, I've got to go right back to the beginning, which is Mathoura and cross country. And so this episode, we're going to follow my journey through school, primary school, high school, into cross country, and how it awakened my desire for the City to Surf. And through that desire of City to Surf, and I guess what I achieved with City to Surf and the love of it and the training for it, then led me to half marathons and marathons, and then obviously to Big Red Run, to ultra marathons, and now Mission 231. So it's funny when you're on a mission like this and something big, and you stop and you actually start looking back. And I'm lucky that I've kept all these journals over the years that I can now look back on. But you stand back and you can actually see, it's like a dot-to-dot picture. You can actually see all the dots being connected, and you can see where or how you've ended up where you have. Anyway, let's get on with the episode. I'm keen to read the next chapter. So this is cross country we're going to look at now. So we've moved from Mathoura up into the central west to the town of Dunedoo. After being introduced to cross country and immediately falling in love with it, my quest had begun to reach the state level of the sport. During my 3 years in Mathoura, the best I achieved was regional, which was one level short of state. On arriving in Dunedoo in 1988 and entering into Year 5, I continued pursuing my goal. Every year when school cross country came around, I remember going out of town to the school's course. It was a small forest plantation on Dubbo Road. As you ran around the course, you had to get a texter mark placed on your hand to show you crossed all the checkpoints. That's all I really remember about the school cross country. In my first year at Dunedoo, I earned representation duties at districts. This was held at Coolah, a town 30 minutes down the road. This course was a hilly course, run over the Coolah golf course. Unfortunately, I didn't place high enough to earn the right to run at the regionals. It's funny with the Coolah course, running around that golf course, and I remember doing that vividly and again enjoyed it. It was a really good cross country course. The funny part for me was years later, so this is 1988. So we're talking at least 20 years later, returning to Coolah golf course with my children, Dalton, Winston and Tabitha, for representative duties for school cross country through the Catholic system. They were attending St. Joseph's School here in Portland, New South Wales. And so that's where their next level was. And so, yeah, it's funny going back there with your kids to see them run around the same course. It was a different story a year later when not only did I get to represent Dunedoo Central at Coolah for the second consecutive year, but I finished high enough to then progress to the next level, representing at region. This was held at Inverell, a town in the state's northwest and a very long drive. Mum and Dad, as always, with anything we did as kids, were supportive and drove me all the way to Inverell. Again, I don't remember much about the day. And what I do is not to do with the race, and it's quite sad. The course was hard and I have no idea where I finished, but it was nowhere near the front. I remember finishing my race and hearing Mum and Dad being summoned over the PA system. Following them through the crowd, we were alarmed to find 2 police officers waiting for them. My grandfather, Mum's dad, had suffered a stroke in Sydney and was in hospital. It was the days before mobile phones and Mum's sister couldn't get in contact with her, so the police were sent to inform her. I think we got straight in the car and drove to Sydney. My grandfather was released from hospital following the stroke, but unfortunately passed away later in the year. And again, you look at the joining of the dots, or I look at the joining of the dots in my life and my running journey. And here I am with my cross country and slowly improving and progressing and loving it as I'm going through school. But at one of these representative fixtures, or carnivals, if you like to call it that, is my first real connection, I guess, in terms of heart disease with my grandfather suffering a stroke. It was heart disease that later took his life. And his wife, my grandma, mum's side, had previously passed away through heart disease as well. But this is the first time in my life that running and heart disease were connected with that, or phone call, which led the police officers to being there to inform Mum of the stroke that my grandfather had suffered. We continue on. As I entered high school, I continued with my ambition of making it to state cross country. Following a move to Mudgee, which was about an hour away from Dunedoo, Dad got transferred again in the bank, my training went up a few notches. I was also pursuing a career ambition of playing with the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, so I was very fitness oriented. The extra training I was doing for my football was going to assist my fitness and running. All through my years at Mudgee High, I ran well at school level and would achieve representative honours at region. Districts had been cut, and so now it was just 3 levels: school, region and state. However, despite being able to make it through to region, I could never go that extra step. State cross country always eluded me. Either I would get sick before region or my training would fall away. In any case, I was never good enough, or should I say quick enough, to finish in the top 8 and make it through to state. 1995 saw me enter Year 12, my final year of schooling. At Mudgee High, when in Year 12, it was not compulsory to compete in school cross country. However, I was determined to get one last crack at state. so I put my name down for my age group. Once again, I finished high enough at school level to achieve representation at the regionals. This year, it was going to be held on top of Mount Panorama in Bathurst. This was a car racing track circuit in Bathurst, and I knew it was a tough terrain on top of the famous mountain. Due to work commitments, Mum and Dad were unable to come, so I travelled on the school bus. I can recall standing around watching the age divisions heading off on their races, waiting for my turn. This was it for me. 8 kilometres lay between success or failure. If I didn't finish in the top 8 today, that was it, the end of the road. There was no second chance. No next year. After 12 years of running cross country, it all came down to this one race. If I was going to achieve my dream of running at state cross country, I had to finish in the top 8. It was a tough course, very undulating, and finished with a run down into a valley and then up a long hill and then a short flat run to the line. It was a 4-kilometre loop, so we had to run it twice. Standing at the start line, I was nervous. For me, it was all about finishing in the top 8. That's all that mattered, and that is how I ran the race. I set out trying to get in the top 8 and hold my position there. I remember completing one loop and running past a Mudgee High teacher and some kids, and they were yelling out what position I was coming. I can't recall it, but it was in the top 8, but nearer to 8th than first. 6th, I think. This amazing feeling came over me as I realised that for the first time in 12 years, I had a real chance of making it through to state. Down in the valley I went and then up the long hill. I kept looking over my shoulder to see how far back the next runners were. I wasn't concerned with my time. It was all about holding on to that top 8 position. I hit the top of the hill and turned into the final straight to the finish line. A quick glance over my shoulder and the reality hit me. I was going to state. I crossed the line and was handed a paddle pop stick, my ticket to state cross country. As I walked into the tent, paddle pop stick in hand to register my name and placing, tears formed in my eyes. I couldn't believe it. After 12 years of trying, in my final race, I achieved my goal, state cross country. On the way home, the bus stopped at McDonald's. While everyone lined up for their feed, I made my way to the payphone. Yes, people, payphone. Way before the years of mobile phones. I rang home. I wanted to tell Mum and Dad the news. Unfortunately, no one was home, so I left an excited message on the answering machine. That's right, answering machine. No text messages, an answering machine. Then, I love this part, then I brought a celebratory 30-cent soft serve cone. That's how I celebrated going to state cross country, everyone. I bought myself a 30-cent ice cream cone from McDonald's, of all places. I remember that well, that feeling of coming up the hill. I remember zigzagging up the hill with this guy in front of me and looking behind, and we're getting to the top and thinking, I've got this. I'm going to go to state. It's funny, with the state, I actually fell away with my training. It was like you'd reach the top of the mountain, and it's like job's done. And yeah, I remember I did a couple of short training runs around Mudgee, and I ran on my sister's trampoline. And by that I mean those little ones, the mini tramps, and that was my training for state. And you get out what you put in. I believe that, and I pass it on to my clients. I pass it on to my children, and I can't remember how many were in the race at state cross country, but I came 108th, I think. Way down, and I got what I deserved with the training I put in. But all that mattered to me was my state. That was my goal. Okay, back to the book. The original City Surf Dream. This is where the City Surf ambition begins, which has led to other opportunities. With the accomplishment of making it to state cross country, it opened up a handful of running opportunities and goals to me. One of the opportunities was an invitation to participate in an international cross-country meet in Las Vegas, California, the USA. I don't remember much of the details of the invitation, but I do remember constantly reading through the pages of info and dreaming that it would be a great experience and opportunity. I also recall that if I accepted the opportunity, then fundraising was required to help to fund the trip. Anyway, I never accepted the invitation, so my school cross-country days officially came to an end. During my final years of school, I assisted local Mudgee South milkman, Bill Blishen, on his afternoon milk run. I loved running the streets for 3 hours of an afternoon, delivering milk, juice and dairy products to the houses and businesses of Mudgee South. Sometimes I ran blocks ahead of the truck, carrying a crate full of milk. Bill's son Lane and myself used to love trying to improve the time of the entire run each afternoon. It was a great way to keep in shape. After leaving school, Bill offered me more hours, which included assisting the morning shop run. By this stage too, I had my licence, I was able to drive the truck, and even run the business on my own when Bill took a break. The milk run was an enjoyable experience where I got to form a close relationship with Bill and his wife Carolyn, as well as being paid to do something I loved doing, which was of course, running. During these mid-teenage years of my life, I was planning to pursue a career in rugby league with the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. However, at this point in time, I had braces put on my teeth and my rugby league ambitions were put on hold. Running provided an outlet to run off the disappointment of not being able to pursue the game I'd loved since being a toddler. It gave the added bonus of keeping me fit for when I returned to the game. One week while reading the Sunday paper, I learned about an iconic Sydney road race that was held every year on the second Sunday in August, the Sun Herald City to Surf. It was a 14-kilometre run that started in the heart of Sydney and finished at Bondi Beach. Excited by the challenge and the idea of running 14 kilometres from Sydney to Bondi, I decided it was something I wanted to do. My training began in earnest, and I sent away and ordered a City to Surf singlet. Now, I've got to read that line again. It's very important. We're in 2021 now. So this is, what are we talking, 1995, 1996? Well, I've left school, so it's after 95. My training began in earnest, and I sent away and ordered a City to Surf singlet. So you didn't register online like we do these days. You jump on the computer, type in your details, and bam, you're in. I remember you had to cut out the entry form from the Sunday newspaper, fill in your details, tick your box for your singlet, include it was probably a check. Mum and Dad probably wrote the check out for me. How times have changed. How times have changed. But yeah, I sent away and ordered a City to Surf singlet. I don't have any recorded details of my training, but I do remember running a 3-kilometre circuit around Mudgee South, a longer one that extended to the other side of Church Street, or running on my sister's trampolines on wet days. That's that trampoline again. Did me so well for state cross country. Why not put in a City to Surf practice? I was also hitting the gym with a mate at this point, so weights were a part of my program, although they were tailored more towards football than running. The last run I recall doing was my longest to that point in my life. I can't say how long it was, but it was at least an hour, and it involved running my 2 usual Mudgee South tracks, and then heading out Lyons Drive to Sydney Road. From there I headed back into town via Horatio Street and home to Mudgee South. I remember being exhausted and thinking that was so long and boring. I remember that day well. I remember that course, now I think of it, knowing Mudgee South so well, it would have been lucky to be 9Ks, I reckon. Maybe 10. Horatio Street goes for a bit in Sydney Road, but it's pretty flat compared to what we run around here in Portland. But anyway, I do remember finishing that training run and thinking, never again. Like, what am I doing? And it was ages after that before I did any sort of running. But yeah, that was the last one I can remember I've ridden there then. With City to Surf fast approaching, I became sick and my training stopped. City to Surf came and went, and despite my initial solid training, I missed out on running the iconic race. This would become the story of my next decade. Decade, people, not next 12 months or weeks, my next decade. Every year I would begin training around May as the countdown to City to Surf began. That's when they would start advertising in the newspaper. They'd start putting the little features in, articles about City to Surf, and the entry form would appear from May through to August. It became the story of my next decade. Every year I'd begin training around May as the countdown to City to Surf began. And for some reason, usually sickness, I would miss the race. It was extremely frustrating, and as the years rolled over and my City to Surf singlet stretched out of shape, my goal and desire to run the race was shut away in darkness. The singlet was cotton. I remember, like these, I've got my cotton shirt on today, as I usually do for the podcast. I have a Heart Foundation singlet, which is what we call the running material, so it wicks the sweat away and keeps it cool, and it's lightweight. Back then, and I'm pretty sure I've still got it somewhere in my cupboard. I'm sure I'd still have it. It's a white cotton singlet, and I probably bought large. I used to buy all my clothes in large size, even though I was small. So it was probably baggy as anything on me. I think the straps like loop down here. I'll see if I can pull it out, and if I can, we might have put up a photo on the socials for everyone. But yeah, had the City to Surf, I think, in the corner and big on the back, and it was like fluoro sort of colours. But that was my singlet, and I remember doing training runs in it. I would have looked pretty trendy, I must say, probably with my multi-fluoro shorts as well. But yeah, so that's where it pretty much got shelved, my City to Surf ambition and dreams. And it would take, as I mentioned, a decade, so 10 years before I would even look at doing it again. It was actually through, again, there's the dots connect in the big picture, through me establishing a personal training business in Portland, New South Wales, and a client coming to me and setting the goal of running Sit or Surf, which actually got me to Sit or Surf. And we're going to look at that next week. It's going to be like one of those TV series where we've paused. What happens next? You got to come back next week to find out about the very first Sit or Surf race with my client, who is still a client with me to this day. And I've got to give him credit for getting me to Sit or Surf and what has evolved from there as well. But we'll talk more about that next week. That is where it all began for myself and my running, from the early days in Mathoura, the little town of 620 people on the Murray River. Fond memories of the outdoors, the bush, adventure, and trail running, and then leading through cross country. What I'm reading back on that, and I know we know what we're like in our inner selves, but reading that, I guess, reinforces to me how ambitious I am, and how when I set my mind to wanting to achieve something, I really, really push hard to it and don't accept no, and will always try. And I guess I tied that back into the anxiety battle I've been going through and have gone through for the last 2 years. That's the person I'm looking for. That's the person I'm trying to reawaken inside me. That person who has that constant ambition and drive to succeed at all costs, and to push yourself to succeed. Because that's what's gone missing in the 2 years that have been since the anxiety started. So it's all part of the journey. And look, I'm loving it. I'm loving sharing it with everyone. I say it every week, the conversations I get to have, different conversations I have with different people who just that genuine interest in what's happening in myself and the training and the journey and the plans and the fundraising. It's just incredible. So thank you everyone for that support and interest in the journey. I'm glad you're enjoying riding the journey, or running, I should say, the journey with me. The skipping 231 challenge. It has been an unbelievable response. So thank you everyone. At present, at this time, and you can sign up at any time. There's no start or end date for the skipping. It's simply a 4-week period that you do it for. You can start today. You can start in a month's time. Okay, we're running it right through to May. You can sign up at any time. But so far, we've got over 20 people at this point in time registered and skipping away. 231 skips 3 times a week for 4 weeks. That is awesome. Remembering that it's all about getting people active. Inactivity is one of the causes of, or the risk factors of, heart disease. And up to 80% of adults are not active enough in Australia. And so this is what it's all about, just establishing little routines, habits to get ourselves active. And so to have over 20 people already signed up and registered, we've had to order in more skipping ropes, which is fantastic. So it's not too late. Again, in the show notes, I'll put the link if you want to sign up. You don't have to sign up online either. If you're here in Portland or the surrounding communities, you can come and see me. You can give me the cash to give to the Heart Foundation. The $20 goes to the Heart Foundation, but you don't have to do it online if you don't want to register online. You can do it in person. I'll also include in the notes the link to the Mission 231 fundraising page. If you'd like to make a donation to the Heart Foundation, it'd be much appreciated. Our fundraising numbers are going through the roof. We're up near $2,000 at the moment, and it's only early days. So thank you everyone for the support and the donations so far. Training's going excellent. Recovered really well from the 6-hour extra long run last weekend. We had another long run Wednesday, an hour 45. My running buddy Craig came out with me, and we hit the hills and mountains again and got over 500 meters elevation in the state forest. And then I backed it up yesterday morning, which was Thursday morning, with a cold tempo or 60-minute run, which included 30-minute tempo run, which is a faster pace over rolling hills. That went really well, followed by weights. So needless to say, the legs and body are a bit heavy today, but it's a rest day, which is really good. It means I get to come into the podcast studio and talk about running, which I love as well. The weekend coming up, we've got 2 runs. I think it's an hour 30, 90-minute run tomorrow on trails, and then a 2-hour 15 run pushing the hills again on Sunday. But it's all going well. As I said, the support is fantastic, and I thank everyone for that. Look forward to talking more running and more running with heart next week. Until then, get out there, be active, skip, walk, or run, And however you do it, make sure you're doing it with heart. Bye, everyone.